Hey, what's up? I'm Guy.
I'm John.
This is what Kyle Shanahan said about Jimmy Garoppolo's potential.
When you have to talk to Jimmy about one of the best quarterbacks of all time being available, I know Jimmy has the goal to be that. And I believe Jimmy has the ability to be that. And that's what both of us are going for. And if we can get him there and he has the ability to do it, we're going to be pretty happy with who we have for a long time.
All right, before we react to that, here's a reminder. We're happy that you're here. Subscribe to this channel and like this video. We appreciate it.
Also, check out our podcast below in the description.
Okay, so let's address what Kyle Shanahan said on that conference call with the media about Jimmy Garoppolo. Has the potential to be one of the best quarterbacks of all time. That's his goal, and that's in the context of why we kicked the tires on Tom Brady and then went with Jimmy. Do you think he believes that at all? Do you think there's a chance in Kyle Shanahan's body that he goes, this could be possible?
Do you think, or do I think, that he thinks that Jimmy Garoppolo can be as good as Tom Brady one day? I don't. Do I believe that it was a semi-easy decision based on his potential to just keep getting better and Tom's age? Yes. Like there are probably 3 or 4 quarterbacks that you immediately just say, no, we're good. Russell Wilson, Mahomes, probably even Deshaun, who's young. It's a small group that you just don't even think about it. Every other Wentz, probably, just given what they paid him. I'm sorry, Jimmy, even off of leading a team to a Super Bowl, leading might be strong, but having excellent moments and playing in big games, Tom Brady calls, you take his call. Now, I do believe internally, and we've been saying this, and I know sometimes you can forget the playoff run, right? The Minnesota game was shaky. Green Bay game didn't have to do anything. The Super Bowl, as Kyle Juszczyk, remember he said on Good Morning Football, going into the fourth quarter, dude was the MVP of the game.
Yeah.
Right? We just remember the lasting images of him getting crushed and, balls hitting the ground. But
missing Emmanuel Sanders.
I think you think big picture. You factor in he can still get better. First year starting. And I think his contract matters, Guy. You have him on basically a year-to-year deal. He is well underpaid relative to like starting quarterbacks on playoff level teams that aren't rookies, on their rookie deal. I think when you factor it all in, you feel pretty good. But there's a lot to be proven to me over the next, let's just say, 2 seasons with him as a player.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, look, do I think that Kyle just would bang the table and say this can be one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time? No. Do I believe that he believes a little bit of what he just said? I do think he believes there is a chance that Jimmy could become a really, really good quarterback, and a million things that have to go right to become one of the best quarterbacks ever. One of those things is you have to win a bunch of big games. You have to be in a bunch of big games. And part of the reason I don't think it's total crazy talk is because I think Kyle Shanahan's going to put the 49ers in position to do that. Like, if Patrick Mahomes played for any other team, he'd still have a chance to be one of the best quarterbacks of all time and be the best quarterback in the NFL. But he doesn't play for any team. He plays for one of the best offensive coaches ever. And so it feels like it's written in the stars. It's a done deal. This is what Patrick Mahomes is going to be. If Jimmy Garoppolo played for...
Well, he's already like Kurt Warner, right? If his career ended today, it's like it was
Hall of Fame.
Incredible. 2 years in one game.
If Jimmy Garoppolo played for a number of other coaches, I wouldn't even entertain this thought. But the fact is he plays for Kyle Shanahan. And to me, that means he's going to have opportunities to get a lot better every year. He's going to have opportunities just to be in a position to succeed, to make the most of what he has. He's going to have opportunities to play in a bunch of big games over the course of several years, provided he can play well enough to keep his position as Kyle Shanahan's quarterback. And so I think all those things together do give him an outside shot. I mean, it'd be crazy right now. It'd be too optimistic to predict it. But to say, I think he's got some of the things that could take him there, I mean, we'd be crazy to ignore the fact that Steve Young basically did what Jimmy Garoppolo's trying to do, right? Steve Young was the backup quarterback for a great quarterback. Now, Joe was further along in his career probably than, or at least a little closer to the end maybe than Tom was. There were moments where Steve played really well and thought, this is going to be my job. Jimmy never had that. But Steve did have Bill Walsh, who from the beginning thought, like, this guy's going to replace Joe. Walsh probably thought it was going to happen a lot sooner than it did. And Steve Young went on to become, a consensus top 10 quarterback in the NFL without becoming a starter until he was 30 or 31.
I do think, though, Bill Walsh then retires, right?
Yeah.
And Seifert comes in.
Right.
Think about the couple guys that coached them. Mike Holmgren, Mike Shanahan, when he became the starting quarterback. We look back, and I know at the time, it would have been like, well, these guys were Walsh's understudies. Who knows? Looking back, it was like, holy shit. And then even Seifert leaves. Like he couldn't ask for much more if you're going to leave, Bill Walsh.
Yeah.
My comp for Jimmy is Tony Romo. It always has been. And when you look at Tony Romo's career, I'd say, it was solid, had some moments. You'd go, God, what it could have been, though, right? Because Tony Romo played for Wade Phillips, early on Parcells, but then it went from Wade Phillips to Jason Garrett. If I said that Tony Romo for a 10-year stretch had got Kyle Shanahan, a Holmgren, a Mike Shanahan, an Andy Reid, a Sean Payton, I think we would look at Tony Romo probably like potentially like a Hall of Famer, right? He just would have been a lot better. And that's where if you go, well, Tony Romo is like Jimmy Garoppolo. Well, fucking Tony Romo was with Kyle Shanahan at 26, 27 years old, having been an understudy for Tom Brady and then for Kyle. You're like, fuck, he could be pretty good if I say the next 7-8 years. So I would bet on him being a really good player. And I do this sometimes. We all overreact. Like to go all-time greats, so many things have to go right. You have to sustain it for so long. To me, what the goal would be in like the when I say short term, I'd say the next 5 years. Can you go to like 3 or 4 Pro Bowls? And I'm not saying like, well, Deshaun Watson hurt his ankle and Kyler Murray couldn't make. I'm saying Wentz, Jimmy, lock Pro Bowlers, right? Like it's like who's the best quarterback in the NFC? Or Russell, right?
Yeah.
Rodgers is retired. If he can do that, then I think you kind of start building. Because what Steve Young did right away, starting, teams were sweet, fucking went to a Super Bowl, won an MVP, and then it was on. And if Jimmy can have like back-to-back, like no doubt about it, Pro Bowl seasons, then I think you just start being talked about like a star. Also, when you're a starting quarterback for a good team, it just perpetuates and builds and rolls like an avalanche.
Yeah. I mean, Steve Young was not...
But you got to start going to a couple Pro Bowls, right?
And Steve Young was doing more than going to Pro Bowl. Steve Young was doing historic things in terms of being a runner and a thrower. He was the best quarterback in the NFL, right? Like he was doing things that had never been done before in the history of the sport. So I think
Jimmy's not going to do that, right?
No. So just to since I brought up Steve Young, I'll say this: Steve is, I think, underappreciated for how good he was, and I think he's viewed as a top 10 quarterback. Great. I don't think people quite give Steve the credit that Steve deserves. Now, would they if he started playing at 25 and was just stacking up those numbers earlier? Maybe. Was he good enough to start as a player 4 years before he was? Yeah. And so maybe those are some of the things. But I do think one thing that Jimmy Garoppolo would have.
I was watching some of the Emmitt Smith Football Life. I mean, they won 3 out of 4 Super Bowls, and Steve ran into them every time.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like Phil Mickelson, he's got 6 majors. What if Tiger doesn't exist? Does he have like 10? Sometimes you just run into Steve Young, won a Super Bowl, but he also just ran into this fucking Cowboy team, which is one of the great dynasties in NFL history for a 5-year period, right?
Yeah.
And who knows? Like that's where Jimmy goes. Well, he's kind of in control, Like who is the dynasties that he's got to knock off? Really, he might be on the best team.
Yeah, I mean, the Seahawks seem like they're a little past their prime. The Saints will be on the back end at least until they find another quarterback. Maybe it'll be Jameis. The Rams didn't quite continue that ascension to this point. The Packers are on the back end.
I think Philly, as long as Wentz stays healthy, Philly's going to be a factor.
But here's my point, though. Like, if you're Garoppolo and you roll together, last year Jimmy was better. I would say he was pretty good, right? Depending on was he pretty good? No, he was pretty good, right? Depending on in print, it looks a little different. But 28 touchdowns and 13 picks.
I would say I'd say his season was like a tale of two halves, right? His first half was like a C+, B-. I think his second half guy was like a B+, A-.
But people come in and he played in big games. But how you are perceived coming into a season to me is part of how you end up as a Pro Bowler. So if this guy is just a little better this year, instead of 27 and 13, he's 30 and 9, which we say a little better. It's hard to make that jump. But
30 and 9 is pretty good.
Yeah. If he's 28 and 9, hell, if he's just 27, the same number of touchdowns and 9 picks, right? Whatever. to me, if you just keep stacking those years up and your team is playing in conference championship games, every year your team has a shot at the Super Bowl, we start looking at those same numbers a little differently. Like, if 5 years from now the Niners have been to 2 NFC championship games or 3 NFC championship games and another Super Bowl or 2, maybe they win a Super Bowl in the next 5 years and they go to another NFC championship game or 2. And these are huge ifs, I understand. But if he has the same exact season he had last year, but it's over a 5-year stretch where they're continually being in those games, those will become Pro Bowl seasons. I think we'll look back and go, gosh, that was the beginning of something special, not, can he be a little bit better? Because I think he'll just naturally, for them to do those things, have to be better, have to be consistently a guy that can rely on a little bit more, because that's the nature of the position. Your team's going to get more expensive. All of a sudden, his 27 touchdowns 3 years from now are going to feel a lot more valuable than 27 touchdowns did in 2019, just because the nature of the weight that becomes what the quarterback has to carry as your team gets better and more expensive. So I think what he's got going for him, man, is this Kyle Shanahan and this franchise. If he just maintains a little higher level of play, I think it'll be perceived differently than it has been since the Super Bowl.
I think we got two type polarizing players in the league. You always have, when you talked about quarterbacks, the guys that just can't stay healthy, and there aren't that many of them anymore. Bradford was one of those guys for a long time. I think Wentz kind of falls under that umbrella. But 90% of football fans will go, listen, no one disputes when he's healthy, you'd want that guy. And then you have the player, you go, well, the numbers and what I watched don't quite add up. Like last year, Kirk Cousins had his best statistical season. I think the majority of football fans, if you go, would you want him as your quarterback? They'd be like, no. And I think Dak and Jimmy, for example, are like, when you watch them, you go, God, there's something there. And they can have really good moments and they can have bad moments. But I think both of those two guys, and I think why Dak is so polarizing right now, if you could get him for Jimmy's cost, the Cowboys would run to the bank, right? It's just like, is he 35? Like,
right.
If Jimmy was up for a contract, we would be having the same conversation they're having with Dak. Like, I don't know, guy. I don't feel great about giving Jimmy $35 million. But, like, you could win with them. Same with Dak. And I think those are the type guys that when you talk about potential, you just – like Kirk Cousins is what he is. His numbers can be great. He's never going to win big. You don't really want him as your quarterback, but you can make the playoffs with him. At most, you'll probably win one playoff game. Dak and I think Jimmy – and definitely Jimmy, like, you can win a Super Bowl with this guy, but there are going to be some moments you're going to scratch your head. And maybe, unlike Dak, he hasn't played that much. It's just the potential word with him. It's weird because he's a 27, 28-year-old quarterback, but he hasn't played anywhere near as much as fucking most of the guys his age.
Yeah.
He's played as much like Baker Mayfield. His potential to me is like, can he just go to Pro Bowls? And if he can, then you're in good shape, and then you just start stacking it and see where it goes.
Yeah, there's a level where he's totally worth being the 49ers quarterback and isn't one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Right? That's what we're talking about.
I think
fit into that category first.
I think the 2020 goal is to have him be one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the NFC. Like, he deserves the real Pro Bowl bid. Mm-hmm. Not like 3 guys drop out. I'm saying you're one of the 3 quarterbacks. Like last year when the AFC last year was the easiest. It was like, yeah, Lamar, Deshaun, Mahomes. Are you just one of those guys in the NFC? Like this year it was like Russell was a lock. And then you're like, yeah, Wentz had some moments. You're like, Rodgers, his numbers look good. It was a little difficult. But Jimmy wasn't really in the discussion. And I got no problem with it. But like next year, you want him to have a season where you're just like, he's the Pro Bowler.
Right. I think the other thing we heard in Kyle's voice there, when you say, I think somebody has the potential to be this, what you're also saying is they might not be this. Like, I have questions about whether or not Jimmy will become this. We'll have to wait and see together. But I think one thing nobody questions is Kyle's ability to get the most out of a quarterback. That's one thing where you compare Garoppolo to Romo. Whatever happens with Jimmy Garoppolo 5 years from now, there won't be the what ifs. What if he was on a more talented team? What if he played for an offensive coach? What if he played for Andy Reid? What if, right? That's the one thing I feel good about here is we're going to look back and go, yeah, whatever happened, provided he's healthy. That you get hurt, it's a different story. Provided he's healthy, I'll go, I feel pretty good after you play quarterback for Kyle Shanahan. I got an idea what your ceiling is.
That's where I think him and Dak really parallel each other. It's like, you got weapons, you got a good team. Dak now has a good coach too. It's like, it's time.
Yeah.
Right. There's just And I think those are two of the more is Kirk Cousins even polarizing anymore? Or is he just kind of is what he is? I think when you have guys like under 30 that you're like, I don't know, I don't see. And oftentimes, those guys are always, he just didn't quite be what I thought he would be. And that's the sad part, I think, kind of about Romo. But I think the thing with Romo is Romo actually maximized his talent. It was like his coaching staff was shittier. Remember, their O-lines were bad. Like Jimmy.
He was better than a bunch of 8-win seasons, right? But that's what he had, a bunch of 8-win seasons.
Like Jimmy's got his shot. Romo would have died for these teams, right? Just take advantage of it. And that's what I think makes 2020 so intriguing for the quarterback position for the 49ers.
All right, let us know what you think about this down in the comments below.
Like the video.